All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get going. Good afternoon. I am Adrian Miller, Executive Director of the Colorado Council of Churches. Thank you for being here for this webinar, Unleash or Unlock, although I like Unleash, Unlock Your Advocacy Power, Creating Change at the Federal Level. I am so grateful that Jeff Tieman has agreed to be here for us. It's going to be really informative, and he's going to talk about just basically how to be an effective advocate. This is his presentation is about 20 minutes, so we want this to be really interactive. So you may ask questions either in the chat or because we have an intimate audience, you can also unmute yourself. Just let me acknowledge you before you start talking, just so we can manage the conversation. But Jeff Tieman is President and Chief Executive Officer of the Colorado Hospital Association, CHA, which he joined in August 2022. In his role at CHA, Jeff provides leadership and direction for the association's work to serve and advocate for the state's 100 plus hospitals and health systems. And with that, I will turn it over to Jeff.
All right, awesome. And Adrian's going to help me with the PowerPoint slides today so that I don't have to do that from my own computer. So there we go, screen sharing. Um, so awesome. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here and honored to do this, especially for my friend Adrian. So glad to be with you all this afternoon. I'll just start by saying I'm going to run through a presentation I developed. But to Adrian's point, happy to take questions and have some dialogue, especially once I get through my sort of prepared remarks. Please know there is no dumb question. As I was preparing for this, I realized I do this for a living every day and have for decades, but not everyone does. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And then lastly, by way of preliminary remarks, every photo in my slide deck is my photo from my own collection, so there's no copyright issues here. So Adrian, you can go to the next slide, please. There we go. Awesome. All right. So, as Adrian said, I'm Jeff Tieman. I work here in Denver, where I was born, raised, and educated at Colorado College in Colorado Springs. I left Denver in 1997 and moved to Chicago, where I started my career as a reporter. But I've also lived in Washington, D.C., where I was for 15 years, and in Vermont, where I had the same job I have here in Colorado, but representing that state. So I have been back in my home state of Colorado for about 3.5 years and thrilled to be here. I started my career as a reporter covering healthcare. And then when I moved to Washington, D.C., I switched to advocacy, where I have been basically ever since. I spent the bulk of my career at the Catholic Health Association in Washington, D.C., where I led communications and advocacy efforts around the Affordable Care Act. The Catholic Health Association represents the Catholic hospitals around the country, and you may not know was really pivotal in passing the Affordable Care Act. In fact, without the voice of CHA, the bill would not have become law. So it was an amazing place to be at an amazing time. I became ultimately the chief of staff there, and I worked for a nun who is retired now, but was and is an absolute political animal. I learned everything I know about politics from Sister Carol. She's also a close friend of President Obama, and generally just an amazing human. Um, so now I'm back in Denver, where I'm CEO of the Hospital Association, as Adrian said, and that involves representing the interests of our hospitals and health systems here in Denver at the Capitol and also in Washington, D.C. Next slide. So when we talk about advocacy, you can talk about it in a couple of ways broadly. And I think in the most general sense, advocacy to me includes any activities that help promote or advance a perspective, that share a point of view, that seek to influence policy. So that could be like congressional visits, which we're going to talk a lot about today. It could be letter writing campaigns. It can be paid advertising. It can be demonstrations and public speeches and events. And so in my world, we call all of that big A advocacy, which is sort of the full suite of activities that are part of sharing your viewpoint and ideally moving people to advance a certain policy or protect a resource, whatever the specific ask might be. When we talk about small a advocacy, that's more about sort of the outreach we're going to talk about, the tactical day-to-day lobbying work, which includes visits to legislators, conversations with regulators and others who make decisions every day that affect the common good. And so that's really the sort of two components of advocacy. And then I add the third bullet on here because Sister Carol, who I mentioned a moment ago, always taught me that um, budgets are moral documents, and that is a lot of what legislators do is develop budgets, and budgets reflect choices. They reflect priorities. So when a budget spends a lot more on federal detention of immigrants than on care for immigrant communities, that represents a choice. It represents a moral decision. And there are literally hundreds of those kinds of decisions enshrined in every budget proposal and in every budget that becomes the law. Next slide. It's really important to remember that as members of the faith community and representing churches and that sort of segment, that you are not a typical lobbying force. When you make a phone call or you go to a congressional office on behalf of a church or a social service organization or a membership group that's focused on faith issues, you are perceived differently. And I know that because I spent many years representing the Catholic Health Association. It's more of a white hat, more moral authority, whatever you want to call it. People sit up and listen in a different kind of a way. And I've been doing Capitol Hill visits for literally a few decades, and I can tell you that every single time I am up on at the Capitol, there is always a faith group working its way through the offices and carrying its message. Last time I was in D.C., it was the National Prayer Breakfast folks who were making the rounds. Again, a group that gets an audience and people really care about their message and what they have to share. So just remember that as members of that community, you bring a unique vantage point that carries a very different kind of credibility and weight than people who are representing oil and gas or AI data centers or something that's more parochial. Next slide. This is me with Representative Jason Crow in the photo. So why do we do Hill visits? What's the point of having a meeting with a member of Congress or with someone on their staff? I think it's more than just navigating the underground tunnels and the office buildings that constitute Capitol Hill. The main reason we want to go up there and talk to these people is because they're not made in a vacuum. Um, Legislators need context, they need perspective, and they need to hear from people, not just reading reports and infographics. They learn the most when they talk to their constituents, when they hear stories that resonate with them and bring a public policy issue to life. Um, while it's less true for some of the staff members who tend to be kind of policy nerds or in the weeds type people, legislators and even their staff still get the most out of visits when they can hear and see your passion, where an argument on paper becomes a real life situation with which they can identify and understand. And then it's also so important when you have these visits and these conversations to be establishing and building relationships. As I'll say more about a little bit later, the visit itself is only part of the broader plan here. And that plan includes creating and sustaining relationships with legislators and members of their staff so that later you can pick up the phone and call these people and they'll answer you. They'll know who you are and why you're calling. You can share an email update that they'll actually read because they have an established connection with you and they remember a story you told. And of course, it's also great when the information and direction you share actually changes policy. A law that passes or doesn't pass, a provision that gets into a bill or gets deleted because your voice helped make that happen. And I'll just give you one recent quick example for myself. I was in a meeting just last week with the leadership of the federal Medicaid agency. They had several senior staff people visiting Denver and convened a listening session. I raised an issue that is affecting hospitals in a challenging way and creating sort of difficulties for hospital administrators and staffs and creating a lot of unnecessary cost and burden. And right away, the leadership we were meeting with said they thought that made a lot of sense and pledged to work with us to make it happen. So that's advocacy in action, and it's the kind of stuff that that you can see and feel and touch and know that you're actually making a difference. Next slide. And this one, Adrian, has a couple different pieces. So if you advance to the next one, there you go. Okay. So when you're getting ready for a Capitol Hill visit, or even if it's a phone call or Zoom meeting, there's some things that you're going to want to do. Planning and coordinating logistics, obviously, and scheduling the meeting, that matters a lot. And Adrian, if you just go ahead with the next couple, so they're all on the screen. There you go. There's one more. There you go. Thank you. So the first step is to make contact with the offices that you plan to visit. Um, and if you don't have a person you know, you can usually reach out to the main number or find a contact on the website that will tell you the policy person you might want to reach out to, or just a public affairs person who you can contact to try to set up the meeting. You may or may not get to talk with a senator or a member of Congress themselves. Often your point of contact will be a member of the staff, a legislative aide, a policy expert, sometimes even the chief of staff or a communications person. Um, and whoever you're meeting with, though, whether it's the senior most person or a member of their team, they'll need to know a few things that you'll want to think about as well, including what is the size of your group? How many people are you bringing? What do you hope to discuss? And how long of a meeting are you requesting? Typically, you will get a chunk of time, but not a lot. And if you're with the member of Congress, you might get even less time. Sometimes these meetings literally last only a few minutes. So you want to be ready with really crisp talking points, stories, pieces of data that you can share in the event that you don't have a lot of time to convey your message. So time is super valuable in these cases. You want to make sure you have an elevator speech in the event that one person has to sort of carry your message quickly and effectively. If you're bringing a group up to the Hill or you're bringing a group to a Zoom meeting, know ahead of time who's going to open things up, what each person is going to say. Make sure that you bring or share leave behind materials, fact sheets, information that help explain or illuminate your issue. Hill staffers, the people who do the policy work, they will read what you hand them. And sometimes even lawmakers themselves will take the time to sit with your materials and digest them and follow up accordingly. So it's really important that you also think hard about what hard copy or other kinds of materials you might want to share. Next slide. So I got this slide from the National Journal, sort of a guide to effective lobbying. I think the main point here, without reading every word, is that if lawmakers are doing their jobs, they want to hear from you. They need to hear from you. They're thirsty for information to guide their decisions and to inform their votes. Even if they don't ultimately vote how you want them to, or move in the direction you prefer, they need to know how you feel and how these important issues will affect their thinking, what people you represent, who are living a daily life that matters because of the decisions being made on Capitol Hill. And I think again, the perspective that you bring that does not come from someone who works in a think tank or a policy shop, or who's a DC lobbyist, are what are the implications of what you're talking about for real people on the ground? How does a proposal or a policy affect actual people and communities? What does it mean, in my case, for when Medicaid gets cut or when SNAP benefits are slashed? What happens to faith communities when the people they serve and convene are left behind? Those are the kinds of questions that you can help answer, and only you can bring these stories to life in a way that is so compelling for the people who are making big decisions for our country every day. So just know that when you're there, people care, they're listening, and they're tuned in. Now, as a cautionary note, that's not always true, right? Sometimes the staff member is preoccupied, or they're bored by your plea because they think they've already heard it or because they've already made up their mind. That's okay. I've been in plenty of meetings like that. They still need to know what your point of view is, and they're still in front of you listening, and that's important and still represents an opportunity. Next slide. So again, as Adrian and I were talking about before you all joined us, it's quite likely that depending on the issue and the timing, the person you will speak with when you have a visit, whether it's virtual phone or in person, will be a staffer, will be a member of the legislators team. You can see on this slide sort of the general architecture of what staffing looks like in a congressional office. As I mentioned, you could meet with any of the people listed on the slide, and you may meet with them in DC or here in Colorado. You may meet with them at an event and not even an office. A casual conversation that you have with Diana DeGette or Gabe Evans can be super meaningful, even if it takes place on the periphery of a rally or at another kind of public event. It doesn't have to be at an office table. And that goes same for their staff. So just know that whatever point of contact you establish or can interface with is a valuable one, whether it's at an office or it's at a lunch or it's somewhere else. When you're actually on Capitol Hill in DC, sort of moving from office to office, you will often hear as you're waiting for each lawmaker, you will often hear the sort of front desk person taking constituent phone calls. Those calls come in constantly. And they are recorded and tracked and monitored. So imagine how much more powerful it is and amplified your voice is when you're sitting there in front of them and not talking to them on a phone that's been ringing all day. It's just, again, the power of being in person. In this case, it's super important and really matters. Next slide. Okay. So how do we sequence these meetings? Again, regardless of where you are or how the meeting sort of comes together, you want to have an organized plan and a compelling way to present the material that you're sharing. So obviously the first thing you want to do is start the meeting by introducing everyone in attendance. Generally, the member of Congress will introduce his or her staff and then ask you to do the same. So once those intros are complete, next up is kind of the bottom line of why you're there. And this is a piece of advice that I think is maybe the most important, which is start with the story. I love to start with a story. It's a hook. It's important. Narrative matters. Adrian and I are on together on the board of the Colorado Public Radio because we care about the power of story. And in my world, it's a patient who can't get the care they need. It's a nurse who pulled an extra shift during the pandemic. It's a baby who was saved by an amazing NICU staff. Those stories resonate, they matter, they're heard. And they can be more serious stories too. Like I was recently on Capitol Hill talking about hospitals that serve thousands of people but could close because of recent legislative changes. So starting with an anecdote, a story, a narrative, it grabs attention, it gets people interested. Think about when you are watching something or reading something, it's more compelling when there's a story. Data matters, but it doesn't come first. Use data and data points once you've captured their interest and have sort of started with a narrative. And then you can fill in the relevant data points and the information as you move through the conversation and work to shed light on the issue that you're raising. And then finally, you want to move into sort of the policy implications of what you are bringing forward. Um, and that ultimately leads to your ask, your request. What policy do you want changed? What bill do you want the person to support or oppose or amend? What bill do you want them to think about drafting or introducing? What outcome do you want? You don't want to be blurry about this. You want to be succinct and clear and compelling. The member of Congress or their staff member, they won't know what to do after the meeting if you don't make that clear. What is the action that you want them to take? And sometimes that might be as simple as we want you to think about this more, but make sure that you share with them what it is you are asking them to consider or act on. Next slide. And so a bit more about this because it's really important. I think in the meeting, it's most important, I think, first and foremost, to be yourself. Um, I was with a team last year on Capitol Hill. There were two people from one of our hospitals who'd never done this before. And they told me they were completely caught off guard by the theatrics of it. By navigating Capitol Hill, the big office, the hearing room, the committee chamber, those things can be sort of intimidating. And it's just important to kind of ground yourself in what you're there to do, which is share a message. I can tell you too that when you're on Capitol Hill, meetings can end up taking place in the craziest places, like as something as grand as the Ways and Means hearing room because the legislator doesn't have any room in their own office, or something that frankly more closely resembles a closet where 10 people are crammed into a very tight space. So don't let the setting move you off your message. You're still there to do the same thing regardless of where or how the meeting happens, which is to thoughtfully, but also forcefully share your perspective. And remember, you're talking with elected officials and their staff members. These are people who have been selected by the general public and now paid by them to consider your viewpoint as they make really important decisions about the future of Colorado and the future of our state and country. Um, think of it like it's not the lawmaker who's the guest of honor, but you. And remember that if someone makes a crazy ask of you, you want it to be fair and clear. You want the ask to be fair and clear, not crazy or blurry. So just keep that in mind. Next slide. There we go. So again, be yourself. That's the most important thing. You don't need to be a policy wonk or a subject matter expert for your argument to be heard and to be powerful. And no matter how convinced and passionate you are about something, you may meet with someone who just doesn't agree or share that perspective. In that case, they may or may not respond, or they may respond by saying that they disagree with you. In that case, I think it's important to stay calm, cool, and collected. Tell them you understand their viewpoint, but also want to make sure that they understand yours. And remember that even if they don't agree with you, your argument is more impactful because you're not from sort of a typical lobbying organization or a law firm. And lastly, on this, I think it's important to remember meetings can end abruptly. A vote buzzer rings, there's an unexpected development that requires people to leave. So you want to be ready with your quick leave behind message and any materials that you plan to share in the event that your conversation gets cut short. Next slide. So roll with it. Just be ready for things to go not quite exactly as planned. I can't tell you how many times I've had a meeting, and often a really successful one in a hallway. I've met with staffers in hallways plenty of times, but also members of Congress. A couple times ago when I was in DC, I talked with Representative DeGette outside her office as she was feeding her West Highland Terrier lunch. So these conversations can happen in a lot of different ways. Um, and of course, you should be ready in the event that someone gets a phone call or an email and your meeting is delayed or canceled. Don't take it personally. That's not about you. It's just about what happens on Capitol Hill and how that kind of takes shape sometimes. Next slide, Adrian. Okay, so when you're done with the meeting, follow up is really, really important. Thank you notes matter a lot, and my advice is that they should be sent by email. As nice as a handwritten note can be, sometimes they don't reach offices quickly. There's a lot of security that correspondence like that has to go through to be sent to a Capitol Hill office. If you have promised an update, be sure to follow up and actually provide that update. Reach out to the staff person who organized your meeting, share additional materials they may have requested or information that didn't come to light in your meeting. And remember that advocacy doesn't happen once. It's not a one-time shot. It's a constant flow of activity and work and lobbying. And you have to be the one to keep up the rhythm, maintain that communication channel. And the more you do, the more you preserve that important relationship. And again, it's great when you can pick up the phone and dial a member of the staff or even the member of Congress and have them answer because they know who you are and why you're calling. Last slide, I think. So continuing advocacy can take on a lot of forms, as I said at the beginning of our meeting here. It can take the form of coalition work, where you work with others to advance a message, where you use the media to do that, sending op-eds, letters to the editors, sometimes paid media in the form of commercials or placed advertising. Again, big A advocacy can encompass a lot, but it's the importance of just maintaining that sort of constant rhythm and staying in touch and making sure that your issues don't fall off the radar because you only visited once and thought that sort of did the trick. So, Adrian, I am going to stop there and happy to take any questions or comments that the group might have.
All right, Jeff, thank you. That's so great. I have a ton of questions, but I'm going to yield my
Okay.
time to the distinguished people on this webinar. So if you have a question, if you wouldn't mind just kind of raising your, using the raise hand feature, so I can call on you and then we will do it that way, or you could place one in the chat. Let me activate the chat so I can watch. So anyway, Who has a question? All right, Gene. Oh, if you could please identify yourself just so Jeff knows who
Okay.
you are.
Hi, I'm Jean Demler. I'm a member of the Capitol Heights Presbyterian Church here in Denver, and am active with a group called Journey with Migrants, which is 8 congregations that are working um, with our new immigrants. And yeah, I have a lot of questions too, so I'll just throw out one. I guess I'm not very good at going to the U.S. congressional people. We work a lot, with the state stuff. And so I'm wondering what I've done. I don't know whether it's sort of okay or not. So in one case, I caught the mayor, Johnston, at an event, and as he was leaving, handed him a statement of faith, a statement made by people of faith about the immigrant stuff. And then Bennett was here last weekend, I think, and I gave him something. I can't remember what I gave him, but um, I feel a little like it's not appropriate in those cases. So I'm kind of curious, should I stop that and just do the more regular visiting
Yeah.
them in their offices?
Yeah, so I would say definitely don't stop meeting them where they are. If you have a chance to meet them in Denver at an event, or at a public thing, you should definitely do that. They will react differently based on just their own personal preferences to things like being handed materials. They might say to you, for example, I'm happy to look at that, but please give it to my staffer here because I won't be able to keep track of it. Um, but I think they're generally pretty amenable to that, and I think you have to read the room, right? If you're in that situation and you're approaching a member of Congress and they're nervous about it or it's not their preferred form of interaction, I think you'll know that. And your best bet is to kind of back off and say, is there a staff person I can talk to or find the staff person to talk to? But again, they're public servants, so I wouldn't shy away from trying to interact with them. I think it's just about being careful about it and respectful. And if they do reject that sort of outreach, follow up with a staff member, and understand that, just don't push it, I think would be probably both for security reasons and just so that, you maintain a good relationship. But there's nothing wrong with meeting people where they are. Again, like I said, doesn't have to be in their office, and there's a lot of good interactions that happen just how you described.
Okay, great. Yeah, I thought maybe I was being too pushy, but I did get to Bennett's. I gave a copy to Bennett's aide as well as to him.
Great.
And
Awesome. That's always the best way to make sure someone sees it and keeps it.
Yep. All
Thanks
right,
for the
others.
question.
Others. Well, if not, let me ask a question while others are putting their questions together. Um, so, we see a lot of campaigns, right? Contact your congressman with the letter or email. Just your own gut feeling. Effective do you think those campaigns are? Because my personal feeling, having been on the other side, receiving constituent contacts, I always feel like an unscripted communication from someone in my district has the most effect. But yeah, could you share your?
Yeah. Sure, Adrian, that's a great question. So I think there's two pieces to that. First of all, you're right. The more personalized communication and outreach is going to be valued more because it's not sort of a form letter, it's not a standardized thing. So I think that's just the case. However, it's also really important to know that when there is kind of a form letter situation or an advocacy alert where dozens or hundreds of people are going to send essentially the same thing, they count those. So even if it doesn't feel like they got individual outreach from 100 people, they're going to care a lot that 100 people sent a note. They will take note of that. And so, for example, in our world, we're constantly encouraging hundreds of people to message their member of Congress. Some of those messages are going to be tailored and customized and to the right person, and a lot of them are just going to go to the general mailbox, but they're going to notice both. And so I think it's really important, whether it's quantity or quality, they both matter.
Okay, thank you. Mary Ann, I saw you unmute, so I think you have a
Um,
question.
well, sort of related. I'm wondering about the effectiveness of like policy days where a lot of people descend all at once and, you know, just their responsiveness to that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I'm going to use a Colorado example on this one. I've certainly had lots of fly-ins in DC and done that in Washington. But a couple weeks ago, we had 100 members of the hospital community, including doctors, nurses, administrators, IT people, you name it. They came to the Capitol, and we did kind of a coordinated set of visits. And I'll tell you, sometimes it wasn't very organized. We were literally pulling lawmakers off the floor, and having conversations with them in the hall. But again, they do notice that. They cared a great deal that so many people from the hospital community drove a long distance to show up in person. That stuff matters. They do notice those events. They do notice the volume of them, how many people came, what kinds of people came. So I think there's a reason that groups like mine organize those events, and it's because they are noticed. The other thing that can happen when you do something like that, for example, we had a whole bunch of physicians who came in scrubs. And guess what happens when you show up to the Capitol in scrubs? People take pictures of you, and you end up in the
Right.
paper. And so your message can get amplified, not because you talked to a lawmaker, but because a reporter saw you, and made a story out of it. So I think those events are good. I think they're productive. And as long as you're respectful and thoughtful about how you organize it, you don't get in people's way. I think those can be really, really useful events, and we certainly do them all the time, both here and in DC.
Well, and I was wondering about the follow-up piece then, because, if you're one of a crowd of people, if you're the person who sends the thank you note, you're the person who follows up and says, oh, in our discussion, we mentioned, and here's a handout or whatever. That may be
Absolutely.
more
And
effective.
that's a great way to sort of pull yourself out of the crowd, because like in this event that we did, we didn't do any organized follow-up. The follow-up we encouraged was for each of the people who came to send a note to the legislators they talked to send a note to the staff person they met. And then it becomes, as Adrian was pointing out, then it becomes that more personal one-on-one interaction versus part of the group. So again, follow-up is super, super important. And when you're part of a group, that's a great way to say, "Hey, I was in the group that met with you the other day. Here's something I didn't share that I'd love for you to know."
Mhm.
And that's really valuable.
Thanks.
Jeff, your story about the physicians in their scrubs, when we have faith leaders show up in their vestments and their clergy attire, it has a temporary civility effect. That's what we've
Absolutely.
noticed.
Yep. Listen, optics matter, right? So,
Yep.
yeah.
Others.
Linda, it looked
Oh,
like maybe Linda had a question.
yeah,
Yeah,
Linda.
I think you've answered it because it's on the same vein. There are folks in our community who write postcards regularly. They
Hmm.
they meet and they write and they send all these postcards in.
Hmm.
And is that again effective? Not necessarily because of the message, but because of how many are coming.
Yeah.
And
Again, it's effective because of the volume. They do pay attention to the volume of things that come in on a given issue. And so, yeah, just like any other kind of outreach, the postcard campaign can be really effective.
okay. Mhm.
Others.
Yeah.
All right, Gene, you want to ask? Oh, go ahead. Did you see another?
We,
Yeah, I've
is
got
it
Oh, yeah, Gene. Okay.
maybe a
we got David and
comment.
Pius? Did I say that right?
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, and maybe it's cynical, but my sense is that at the Colorado level, legislators actually do listen and do respond.
Hmm.
At the federal level, it seems much less so that they are driven by, frankly, a lot of them just wanting to get reelected. And that we unfortunately Jason Crow's my rep, so he really is good and really has. But I just see so much, and so I guess I'm just wondering how effective it is to just like beating a dead horse that these people aren't going to listen no matter what you say. Um, and how do you how do you change it to make it more like Colorado, where representatives will actually hold town halls, will um, listen, and maybe your thing is just keep hammering away at it.
Yeah. David, you're speaking to some components of the system that are a little broken, and that's true. But I worked for a guy for a long time, at the Catholic Health Association, who said advocacy is primarily about dogged persistence. So even when you're facing someone who disagrees with you, or you're facing someone who seems absolutely obstinate, you just got to keep making your case. That's what this is about. And you may not persuade them, you may not change their mind. But I think the fact that they know you're out there and that their viewpoint isn't the only one, it's still really, really important. We go to the Hill all the time and meet with legislators who we know are not going to vote the way we want them to. But it's really important that they know how upset we're going to be that they did that. And you know what? Later, sometimes what happens is that they'll come back to you and they'll say, you know, that bill you wanted me to vote for, I did because my party wanted me to. Between us, I shouldn't have, and I learned a lot. And so that does happen, and I think it's easy to be cynical, but that dogged persistence just it matters. Should we go to Pius next?
Yeah, I had the same question as David. Uh, Essentially, sort of contrasting the different people who are in the legislature. Um, for example, Mr. Hard, one of the one of the representatives, is now being censured by the president because he voted some way that the president was unhappy about. I mean, maybe you can maybe comment about the changing presidency, the changing um, architecture of our nation. How was it when Biden was there? How is it now? How do you foresee it to be? Maybe that might be an interesting, point to sort of uh, discuss just a little bit.
Yeah, Pius, you did not ask an easy question on that one. So let me do my best because I think it's an important but hard question. There is no doubt that our current political environment is more challenging. It's more challenging because we have a president who is extremely obstinate and convinced that he is right. And frankly, his tactics can be challenging and can be really aggressive. And so it has changed the landscape. It also changes the landscape when you have a president who is able to keep their party in line. Um, and, you know, it's one of the reasons that a lot of us in the advocacy world prefer mixed government, right? We prefer people of both parties because it provides some balance. In Colorado, of course, we have a supermajority of Democrats and a Democratic governor. In Washington, it's kind of the opposite, right? We have a lot of Republicans in Congress and we have a Republican president. And anytime that happens, the dynamic is going to shift accordingly. And then when you have a personality like President Trump, who can be, aggressive and intimidating, then, that does create a situation that's even harder. But I think, again, whatever political dynamic you're managing, you just got to you don't go around it, you go through it. And, I think when you see President Trump get upset about things, it's because someone made a point that really resonated, that really hit, and he didn't like it. And that's part of what we have to do is raise up stuff that's uncomfortable, and work through the difficult political environment. We've had them before, we're going to have them again. But I would hate for any of you to say, boy, my time or my effort's not worth it because all this is so set in stone, or we have a leader who has a cult of personality and is really good at keeping people aligned with him. If we all stop raising our voices, then only one set of voices is going to be heard, and that's not going to work either. So I know that may not be a satisfying answer, but it's a tough question and a difficult issue in our political sort of landscape.
Other questions? All right, Gene, I know you had several, so do you want to ask another one?
Linda had her hand up.
Oh, okay, I didn't see
Oh,
her.
well, you go ahead. You go ahead.
No. Go ahead, Linda.
Well, this is just kind of a personal one. Sometimes when I get frustrated, I write letters to people that I disagree with, but you have to say in your emails and so forth that you're not a constituent. So I'd really like to know, do they really ever read things that are not from their constituents? That's just from your observation. Because I'll just give an example. I'll just say this is kind of immoral and blah blah blah. And I'm sure it's very respectful. I'm sure you feel the same way, and I'm sure that we're both hoping for, you know what I mean. Actually, it's a guilt. It's trying to guilt them. Are those ever read, or are those just really off the air?
I mean, it's hard to say, Linda. I think they obviously a legislator is going to tend to listen to their constituents first and foremost. That doesn't mean that other messages get obscured or ignored. And again, I think, I mean, I get paid to make sure we're raising our voice everywhere and every way we can. And sometimes it's going to hit a brick wall, and sometimes it's going to get through. And I would be less concerned with sort of who you are or how you're perceived than with the quality and content of your message. Just be confident about that, and they may or may not respond to it or hear it, but they certainly won't hear it if you don't try.
Okay. All right.
And Linda, I just want to reassure you that every time you sent one of those emails to me, I've actually read all of it.
Yeah, that's
I haven't
great.
sent too many to you.
All right, Jamie, do you have a question?
Well, actually, at this point, I have a comment. I think, Jeff, you're really encouraging us, you're inspiring us, because one gets frustrated. So at the state level, one day when I testified, there were three others sort of faith people talking. And at the end, when they made their little comments about how they were going to vote, this one person says, well, the faith leaders made an absolute truth in their talk about we're all human dignity stuff. It was about immigration. And then he proceeded to vote against the bill. And, I think I came home thinking, oh God, what am I doing? So I think your comment there, your instruction that we we don't do it because we know we're going to win, but to try to make a point.
You
And
know, I really appreciate that, Gene. What I would say is that while what you described can certainly happen and does happen, I have also witnessed several times, mostly at the state level, but it can also happen federally, where during a hearing, a witness makes a point that is so profound or so important that it does change a vote. I mean, think about it. Why are we having a hearing if you've already made up your mind? And so I've seen people literally change their vote because of a
wow.
comment that was made in a hearing. That's what we're here to do. That's when you made a difference. And for all the other times that they said, I really appreciated what the faith community said, and I still voted against them. You hope that the next time that's different. And I can assure you that sometimes it will be, because they do sometimes hear testimony that's so compelling that they change their vote or their perspective.
Or add
Thank
an
you.
amendment.
Or add an amendment. Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well,
We can go back to pious. Yeah.
Yeah, I think mine is just a comment here, which is I think you look at where your voice can be thrown out, where it can be magnified. And I believe that newspapers, radio, etc., I think those are instruments I think groups I think maybe should use more of. I'm a columnist for the Denver Gazette, for example,
Hmm.
and I think this group or different groups I think should try and use newspapers, etc., to access a wider and a louder voice. I think.
You're absolutely right about that. And I'll just say that we've made the governor and certain legislators very angry at different points because of stuff that gets published in the Denver Post, and that too can change behavior. It can change votes. It can change the trajectory of a bill. And so that's why I put media engagement and those efforts on my list, because that is part of the bigger advocacy work. When you're telling a story, you need to use every vessel you can, and the media is really important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
So, Jeff, I have a strategy question. Have you ever gone into a meeting knowing what you really wanted to advocate, but then you had maybe a compromise position that you wanted to suggest to the legislator or their staff? And I know it's tough, right? Because as soon as you offer the compromise, they'll probably just go to that instead of the main goal. So I wonder if you've ever been in that situation and what's your strategy towards approaching that?
Sure. I mean, I think that happens all the time. I think that's what the pre-research is so important, Adrian, because you want to go into the meeting with the big ask, even if you know there's almost zero likelihood you're getting the big ask, but start there. It's like any negotiation, right? You don't start with the lowest price, you start with the highest if you're selling something. And so I think you want to start with that big ask, and then when they say, Jeff, that's not happening. We're not there, and so you can walk out right now or whatever they say, and you go, well, could we talk about? And then you have your sort of subset of things. I think that is a strategy, and actually, it's one to employ quite a bit because like if you're advocating for some huge policy that's pretty unlikely because of the politics, then what are the subset alternatives that may not get you everything you want, but get you closer or make progress? And you need to do that both because you want to make some progress and because you want the lawmaker to think it's not your way or the highway, right? So that the next time there's an issue, there's room for negotiation. So I think that is part of the strategy there.
Okay.
I had a follow-up question on Linda's, on reaching out to representatives that are not in your district.
Hmm.
Do they actually screen those? Like if I send an email to Jeff Hurd, does it get screened? Do they know where I'm from? Will
No.
they don't really know. So you just can be silent about that.
They won't, David, unless it's something that is like really out of left field, they're probably not going to make a huge effort to figure out who's sending what.
Okay.
And if it's a compelling point, they're going to hear it. If it's something they don't agree with, they're going to ignore it. I'm not sure that really matters based on sort of whether you're a constituent or
Yeah. I appreciate that because I dealing with some water pipelines and different things. I reached out to him and also congratulate them when they support something.
not.
That
Oh, yes.
that you you may disagree with them on five things, but they actually did one thing and say thank you for supporting this.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't include it in my slides. One thing that we do a lot is give legislators awards. When they side with us, when they pass legislation that helps the healthcare system, we'll give them a big thank you. We'll do a public thank you. We'll give them some kind of award at an event. Those things, but believe it or not, these people have big egos. I'm sure you're shocked. Um, and they do respond to that kind of thing. So that's a great tactic. Who doesn't appreciate gratitude? I mean, it really does work. Well,
Others.
I would just say if you have other questions that you think of later, please feel free to sort of funnel them through Adrian. I've really enjoyed being with you for this hour. I'm happy to stay a little longer, but you're a great, thoughtful group, and I really appreciate your passion and your commitment to this. And I'm always happy to answer questions.
Yep. I have
Thank
one
you.
more. I have one more. What would change in approaching a regulatory agency? I'm sure you have to do that a lot in your work. Is it similar approach, or is it something different? Is it a different animal altogether?
Yeah, it's a little bit different of an animal. And part of it is that when you take the politics out and you take the visibility out, it's actually some of it's a little easier because you can get two people in agencies. A lot of times, staff members in agencies will take the time to have not a 10-minute conversation, but a half-hour conversation. You can, these people in the agencies, they may not agree with you, but they care deeply about like the details and weeds of policy. And so you can a lot of times get sort of at a little more granular level with them. And again, they're not sort of as concerned with the pomp and circumstance. They're doing, day-to-day jobs and trying to get things right. And so your voice can really matter in that space. Um, and I think you really just kind of have if you know how to get through, you can have even better access because you can get people who are really, ready and willing to listen.
And then one more, I just thought of something.
Sure.
In terms of outreach to our elected officials at the federal level, do you make it a point to cultivate relationships with the district offices in state?
Yes. Yes. I mean, I think most of our work is with the DC people. But like in Vermont, where I was before here, I had a very close relationship with the person who ran Bernie Sanders' district office or state office. And knowing her and working with her was super valuable and created just important relationship. And you're local, right? So you can have lunch with that person. You don't have to go to DC. And again, that message will kind of filter up, if you will. So yeah, those relationships are really important. You do not have to be in Washington to do all of this. And I think that really matters.
Okay,
Gene?
Jean?
Well, so that reminded me of a question. The we have the Presbyterian Church has the Office of Public Witness, and you may have worked with them. I don't know, Jeff, but what I realized in working with them a little bit is that they work with so many denominations. So they're not going in just as Presbyterians,
Hmm.
but they're going in the Methodist office in the same building and other people. And so it reminded me how important it is, I think, to see this as a real ecumenical effort and make our presence bigger, if you want to say it. So it sounds like you're saying. And I guess my question is, do you think that's good strategy that we work through our public witness offices, whatever denomination we are, or do more individual work?
I mean, I think both, and the example that I thought of when you were framing your question is that I worked, as I said, for the Catholic Health Association for 14 years, and I'm not Catholic.
I thought you were. Well,
No, I'm not. And yet, the important point about the message that I shared all the time was that it was one of moral authority and the common good. And how do I not identify with that? Right. And so I think it's in the case of faith leaders and faith communities, I think the specific sort of faith tradition is far less important than the moral message. And so whatever ways you can find to elevate that moral message and bring it forward, I think it's less important whether you're Presbyterian or Lutheran or Jewish or whatever. It's just we can all agree on these sort of fundamental concepts. And we're here as people of faith who care about your trying to hear that because it should be part of public policy. And so I would say bring it all. Bring the individual faith, bring the collective, bring the coalition. It all matters. And when you're under that faith banner, like I said at the beginning of my presentation, it brings a credibility that's different.
thanks.
Okay. And Jeff, maybe we talked about this beforehand, but could you close by just talking about the value of being nice
Yeah.
as you approach these
Yeah,
legislators?
sure. So I think I lived in DC for a long time, and not everybody there is nice. I will just assure you that that's the case, and I think they deal with so much conflict and so much tension, and controversy, frankly, that when they have a visit that's loaded with more controversy and more tension, they're going to file that away as part of the sort of muck of being in politics. When you walk out of a meeting and they go, Adrian was a really nice guy. And even when I disagreed with him, he kept his cool. He didn't lose his temper. They're going to remember that in a different kind of way. And again, file it in a different kind of way. And that's why I said as one of my pieces of advice, don't get rattled when they don't agree with you. Just you want to keep a cool head. Make clear that you stand your ground, but not in a way that is aggressive or toxic because they're not going to remember you fondly and you're not building a relationship if you're not sort of being nice and I just think as humans we have an obligation to do that. So that's a great closing, Adrian, is to do all this while also trying to be pleasant and nice because it does matter.
All right. Everybody, let's just give Jeff a clam clap. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, this will be available on our YouTube channel, so please share this with others. We got a lot of great information today. Jeff, thank you so much for doing this.
My
And
pleasure. I really enjoyed this. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Take care.
All right, peace.